What's up, y'all? Marvel Snap just announced their first over-the-air balance change. I am KMBest. Let's break it down. First up, Red Skull. Red Skull went from a 5/13 with an ongoing that gave all your opponent's units a dislocation +1 power to a 5/12 that gives all your opponent's units a dislocation +1 power. Now, this is a small nerf, but they did mention the reason they're making a small nerf to Red Skull is because they plan on a larger nerf to Shuri later. So they're just toning down Red Skull a bit. So in the interim, while we wait for a nerf to Shuri, which evidently cannot be done over the OTA system, then we will have this temporary nerf to Red Skull. So that is hopefully what we're looking at as far as getting a Shuri nerf in the future. But right now, I do think this tones down the deck just a bit. I definitely don't think it makes the deck 100% unviable. The comparison I always like to use for Red Skull Shuri is I would compare it to Moon Girl Devil Dinosaur, which is the same sort of low power 4-cost, high power 5-cost thing. Now, with this situation, we have Red Skull plus Shuri adding up to 26. Occasionally, because of the ongoing on Red Skull, you would subtract 4, so maybe 22. That does bring it much more in line with the Moon Girl Devil Dino thing, which is a 4 plus maybe a 15 or a 17. So we're looking at, about 19 or 21 when we look at other comparable things. Of course, Red Skull still has bigger upside with Taskmaster. Moon Girl Devil Dino maybe sometimes lets you get 2 Devil Dinos. Same sort of thing. Red Skull is still a little bit bigger off of a Shuri than any other 5-drop will be, even at this reduced power. I do expect it to still be around, but one matchup I think this could matter a lot in is any deck that looks to play for points can reasonably, or at least a little bit more reasonably, play for points against these decks now. Like, eventually we're going to hit a threshold at which a Shuried Red Skull is not unbeatable, and we're getting closer and closer to that threshold, and we might have hit it. I don't know yet. I'm interested to find out, but definitely excited for the future of Marvel Snap, because they also announced that they are going to be making changes like this weekly. So there are some other cards to look at that they changed here. This one is obviously the most impactful to the overall metagame, but the next one is actually pretty impactful as well. Next up is Sunspot, who has just been the default card you play in the 1-drop spot if you don't want to play a lot of 1-drops. It's just a generically good card. Sunspot has now gone from a 1/1 to a 1/0, just a little bit of a nudge downward, and that, a little bit of a nudge downward does matter. Like, you go from a card that is, say, maybe a 1/4 or a 1/5 on average, being a 1/3 or a 1/4. That's a pretty significant downgrade. Like, if you're not normally getting your Sunspot much larger than 1/4 or 1/5, that's a 20% downgrade on the power of your Sunspot. That is a relevant thing. And Sunspot is maybe one of the most played cards in the game. Just kind of an issue that they needed to address at some point. I'm glad they addressed it now. I do think it is perhaps badly timed, or I guess I should say, I think maybe this nerf to Sunspot could have waited until after we had access to Kitty Pryde, because Kitty Pryde is a comparable card to Sunspot, and now is, I think, probably significantly better than Sunspot, because now they both start at 1/0, and Kitty Pryde's upside is significantly higher. I think that this nerf makes Kitty Pryde much closer to being the 1-drop du jour for decks that need a card like this. Sunspot, of course, has the synergy with She-Hulk, which will basically always keep him relevant in spots over Kitty Pryde. So, like, if you're playing Doomwave, you're still going to be playing Sunspot. But, the Kitty Pryde ability to be run alongside a card like Killmonger, because you can bounce her back to your hand, the fact that she works through Wave, all of that is very powerful, and she's a very powerful card. So whenever we get her back, I will be looking at a lot of these decks that currently run Sunspot, and I'll be looking at them with a very, very curious eye. Another card I think this benefits is Iceman, who is just sort of a generically useful 1-drop, and maybe at this point we might be running Iceman for the upside of hitting a good card instead of Sunspot and soaking a bunch. That's entirely possible too. Next are a couple of nerfs to underplayed Series 4 cards. First up is Sentry, who goes from being a 4/8, who creates a 4-8 void, to being a 4/10, who creates a 4-10 void. Now, this is an interesting change. I'm glad they did something to Sentry. I don't know if this is enough to make him viable. It certainly adds upside to, you know, both playing Sentry and Vipering the Void, which is sort of what you wanted to do with the deck a pretty significant amount of the time. Now, I don't know if this is enough to make Sentry playable, but 410 is a really, really big number. Like, for example, there are decks that currently play Atuma and run 0 with it. I do wonder if Sentry could fit there. I wonder if he's now an easier big body on 4 to make work. I wonder if maybe there's something to be done with, like, almost even Shuri. I don't know. I'm interested in Sentry now that he has a bigger number on his own card. 410 is really large. Like, it's a sincerely large number. And the fact that you can Viper over the Void is also interesting. Like, there's some Zabu things that could maybe go on here. You could go Zabu into Sentry, then Viper on 4 before their lanes are likely to fill up. You could fill up your lane where the Void, so the Void can't show up. So, like, you could play a Professor X in that lane on turn 5 and then play Sentry on turn 6 and just have a 410, and that's usually a pretty good play to make. Now, there is something to be said for 410 being big enough that you die to Shang-Chi. That is unfortunately true, but there is still, you know, this upside of just being a big guy is pretty useful. I will be interested to see how the Tempo Atuma type decks evolve and if they want to incorporate Sentry and maybe a Viper package. I'm interested to see that for sure, because I enjoy the idea of Sentry as a card. I just don't enjoy playing the card Sentry, as you can see from that blue border. And speaking of cards I just don't enjoy playing, the last buff is to a card I don't even own. Shadow King is going from a 4/3 to a 3/3. So they're taking a whole energy off of his cost, and everything else is going to stay the same. My pitch was always to make him a 2/3. So he'd just be like Scarlet Witch, like a utility option that you could swap in and out of your decks. He'd be really good in Sarah decks, maybe just as a cheap, bad Shang-Chi. As is, at 3, I'm interested to see if he manages to see play. I hope he does, because it really sucks that, like, a card that people spend tokens on, or God forbid, open in a box after waiting for who knows how long, is that bad. I really, really, really hope that they do something good with Shadow King. I still hope they make him a 2/3. I would really be excited to see doing that in the future. So one last note, they do plan on making OTAs a weekly occurrence every Thursday. So every Thursday, I'll be back with another OTA summary video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm KMBest, and I'll see you in the next one.